The Jets drop a tough 19-9 game at home to the LA Rams, and the Garrett Wilson trade rumors are starting to heat up. There were some big takeaways from yesterday, but what exactly are those takeaways? We'll talk about that and much more all here on a Monday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk, and we will be joined by ESPN's Rich Cimini.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Hello everyone, and welcome into another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk, and another Jets loss, tough one, 19-9 loss at home. Garrett Wilson, his post-game comments and Jeff Olbricht's comments on him today, clearly showing that he's in frustration with his situation. Now he's only 13 yards away from 1,000 yards on the season. This is going to be his third consecutive season hitting 1,000 yards. Beat reporter Rich Cimini, who reported Garrett is, most likely going to request a trade from him talking to people in his inner circle once the season comes to a close. So who better to bring on to address the rumors than the person who actually reported it, ESPN's Rich Cimini, joining us. Rich, how you doing?
Connor, how you doing, buddy? Good to be with you. It's been a while. We got a lot to catch up on.
Absolutely, Rich. Last time I had you on, it was right after the Commanders' preseason win. Little did we know that this season was going to turn out the way it was. 4-11 start now, and we were coming off the Braylon Allen big game, Adrian Martinez franchise quarterback question mark, but nope, not the case. Here we are. This team's 4-11, and Garrett Wilson is really the main storyline here. I think 6 catches, 54 yards yesterday, only now 13 yards away from 1,000 on the season. You reported ahead of yesterday's game that you've spoke to people in his inner circle, and you wouldn't be surprised if he were to request a trade once the season comes to a close. What do you have to say on those rumors? Are talks starting to heat up now? And what do you think would be like what do you think the Jets could get back in exchange for a guy like Garrett Wilson, who was a first-round pick in 2022?
Okay, well, that's a lot to unpack there, Connor. So let's just take it step by step. And I think Garrett's been frustrated for a long time. I mean, this just didn't pop up recently. I think this probably goes back at least a year ago. So I said on my podcast, I have a podcast too.
Of course, Flight Deck.
But when I said it, I think it was about a week ago, and we've reported this. Other writers have reported this as well. I mean, it's just I think he's going to request a trade in the offseason. In fact, he was asked point blank the other day about that, and he gave a very non-committal answer. I think he's trying to be accommodating to the media, but he doesn't want to tip his hand, so he's just kind of giving these generic answers, which really don't say much. I do believe, based on my reporting, that he will request a trade. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I mean, you said, what are the Jets going to get for him? The Jets have to still hire the decision makers who will be deciding Garrett Wilson's fate. They have to hire a GM. They have to hire a coach. Those coaches, the GMs, will have to sit down with Garrett Wilson and talk it through and find out where his head is at, where the organization feels. Will a new contract appease him? A lot of things have to happen. I'm still not ready to say he won't be on the Jets next year. Players request trades. A couple of years ago, Lamar Jackson requested a trade. That was a huge story. And what happened? Nothing. He ended up getting a contract, a great contract with the Ravens. So I don't think this is contract related. I don't think that's a money thing with Garrett Wilson. I think it's just more of a how he's used in the offense kind of thing. So a lot has to happen. After the game yesterday, he was clearly frustrated by being basically frozen out of the offense for 55 minutes. And so this is a TBD story.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned a new regime coming in, the decision makers who will determine Garrett's fate in what you said. That kind of leads me to my next point. How much of an impact do you think this new regime will have on potentially Garrett's new decision, as well as the quarterback? We don't know who the quarterback of this team is going to be next season. Garrett said with Kay Adams that He knew when Rodgers came, it was a 2-year window to win. Last season, we know what happened, and this season pretty much down the drain with a 4-11 start. How much do you think those two variables will really impact his decision to request the trade or not?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, the wide receiver's livelihood is tied directly to his quarterback. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to Garrett in the locker room, and I asked him, I said, how much impact will Aaron Rodgers' decision have on your future here? And he replied without hesitation, no impact, no impact at all. So I thought that was interesting. And then I talked to Garrett the other day in the locker room. I think it was last Wednesday. And I asked him, he and Devontae, they're one of the top two, tandems in the league, like statistically, or at least they were until Sunday. But I asked him, I said, how scary would it be if you guys are back next year, the two of you guys? And he kind of threw a little cold water on that. He goes, I'm not even thinking that far ahead. I just want to get through this year before we think. And so that struck me as well. I mean, here's under contract, and he's saying, I don't even want to think that far ahead. So obviously he's got something going on in his mind. And quarterback, coach, GM, I think all of those will have an impact on what he ultimately decides to do.
Yeah, so let's fully transition over to the new regime now. Jets have interviewed a few general manager candidates, John Robinson, Thomas Dimitroff, Jim Nagy, and they're scheduled to interview ESPN analyst Louis Riddick. Are there any sneaky names out there, Rich, that you expect the Jets to target, whether head coach, GM? I know you put out your list of the 9 candidates for the head coach job you expect the Jets to target. Someone who, got to my mind a little there was Anthony Lynn, former Chargers head coach. He was a part of that list. Are there any sneaky names you expect the Jets to go after this offseason?
Sneaky names, huh? You're looking for sneaky names. I did mention Anthony Lynn. I don't know if he'll get an interview. I kind of doubt it. I think he would have been a good hire the first time around after Rex in the mid, around 2015, I guess. He's an experienced head coach. He had a good year with the Chargers. He's a really good leader. I like Anthony Lynn a lot. I think he'd be a good guy to interview. I think the main guys are going to be, I think Mike Vrabel, if I had to bet right now, I would say he's the Jets' number one choice.
Yep.
Will he be their number? Is it going to work the opposite way? Now, I said a couple of weeks ago on my podcast that Vrabel is very open to the Jets.
If he approves of the GM hire.
The key would be like who they hire as the GM. And I think that is going to be the key with Vrabel. I think if you're the Jets and you can hire Vrabel, I would hire him as quickly as I could and then let him have input into the GM hire. So, but I put him in a separate category because he's a proven coach. He's a proven winning coach. And I think his personality would be what the Jets need to create more of a disciplinarian type approach. Other names, I think Aaron Glenn would be a really good coach. I know for a fact from talking to people close to Aaron that this is a really important job for him. He would love to be the Jets coach. He's talked about it as his dream job. So I don't know if the Saints would be his dream job as well, because I think that'll be another team that's interested in. He's had an association with them in the past. I'm just glancing at my list here a little bit. I think, keep an eye on Bobby Slowick from Houston, offensive coordinator. I've mentioned this name before. Also, Liam Cohen from Tampa Bay. Has a connection to Mike Tannenbaum, who's obviously very involved in this search here. But I think those would Brian Flores, another guy to keep an eye on. Previous head coaching experience. I think previous head coaching experience is going to mean a lot to the Jets in this search as opposed to some of their previous searches.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's get into some questions in the chat, Rich, here before we, I know we have a few minutes left with you, so let's get into some of the questions in the chat. Wildwave wants to know, Rich, you stated in your podcast that Brick Johnson was involved in the day-to-day football operations. Could you go in depth on that? Like, is he making football decisions on personnel?
Well, I said that like a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. Since then, the Athletic did a fantastic story, kind of an eye-opening story on the some of the dysfunction going on behind the scenes, and a big part of that story was Brick Johnson's role. Now, I think everyone around the team knew that you see him around a lot. He's at a lot of the games, even though he's going to school up in Boston. Obviously, travels. I saw him in Miami a couple of weeks ago. Now, I didn't know about the whole Madden ratings thing. I think there's different. I don't think that's a black and white story. I think there's some shades of gray there. But I think everyone who covers the team knew about the game ball presentation to
Yes.
Garrett Wilson after the Houston game, which I think, really struck some players as odd. Now, is he making football decisions? I wouldn't go that far, but he obviously has the ear of his father, and his father is the owner of the team. So maybe indirectly you could say he has some influence. It's something that's been on the minds of the players, and it's obviously been on the minds of some of the people in the organization.
Absolutely, yeah, that Athletic story. There's been a few of them now coming from the Athletic, obviously. Brick Johnson now supposedly talking about players when the players could hear them. The whole Woody Johnson telling Mike White he effing sucks thing. There was a lot to unpack there. But Rich, again, I know we only have a few minutes left with you, so let's rapid fire through these final few questions here. Oscar the Grouch, Rich, I want one coach more than any other. Steve Spagnuolo. Is his name at all a realistic possibility? He's easily the best DC in the league, and our D is soft now. I think he's learned a lot from St. Louis. Before you come in here, Rich, I put him on my head coach to avoid list just based on what he did, obviously, in St. Louis with the Rams, that 1-12 start his first season. Who's eventually dismissed. I think he finished his tenure with like a 10-38 record or something like that. So I want to steer clear of Spags, but any thoughts on this comment/question?
Yeah, I'm with you on Connor. I think he is a brilliant defensive coordinator and might win another Super Bowl. He's handsomely paid. He might be the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league with Kansas City. So no, I don't think he'll get an interview, and I don't think he'd be a good hire for the job. I think he's really found his niche, and that St. Louis situation is kind of a stain that's hard to remove. And I'm not so sure he even wants to be a head coach anymore. So I don't think that'll be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I want nothing to do with Spags coming up in this head coach search. Our guy Allen, Rich, Sam gets re-signed in Minnesota. Could you see the Jets explore a deal for McCarthy, especially if Flores is hired and brings in Josh McCown as offensive coordinator? McCown's a very interesting name for an OC job here.
It's a good question. I haven't thought of the McCarthy. I mean, that would be very, very. Minnesota's decision is going to, in many ways, set the parameters for the entire NFL offseason. I think you're going to see about 7 or 8 teams that are going to be in the market for quarterbacks. A couple of them, the Giants and the Raiders, will probably get their quarterback through the draft with the first and second pick. Mm-hmm. That leaves about 5 or 6 teams that are going to be looking for quarterbacks. And I think the Jets will be one of them, because I do not believe Aaron Rodgers will be back. And so McCarthy, if Minnesota re-signs Darnold to a long-term deal, which I think they should,
especially if they make like a Super Bowl push or something like that.
If he takes them on not even a Super Bowl, if he takes them on a long run, if they reach the conference championship and he loses, I mean, how do you let go? How do you let that talent walk out of the building? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you can. Then what becomes of McCarthy? There would be significant salary cap ramifications if they turn around and trade J.J. McCarthy after 1 year. So I'm not even sure if that's doable. That is a fascinating decision. I mean, if for some reason they put him on the market, I think that would be the Jets would be a good spot, especially if you brought a Flores and then a Josh McCown with him. I think that would be a good trio if it's at all feasible.
Absolutely. Everyone smash that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Really appreciate the support. Johnny, I see you backstage. We'll get to you in a moment, but Rich, I know you got to run, so I really appreciate you joining us. You got any final thoughts and, any final buzz you want to share about the team? Any update on Fashanu?
Yeah, Fashanu, there was some thought last night that it was an Achilles injury. It is not, it is, from all indications, it is a foot injury. Okay. Which, makes you breathe a sigh of relief, I guess, because we all know in this town what an Achilles injury means. But foot injuries can be really serious too. We don't know yet. Is it a broken foot? Is it the dreaded Liz Frank injury? I went back and I watched the all 22 of that injury, and it was a non-contact injury. He was basically just leaning on a pass rusher. They were kind of pushing off, and he was backpedaling. and then he just went down, and he was in a significant amount of pain. He was on crutches after the game. So you hope that maybe it's just a sprained foot, and you just hope it's not like a tendon situation, like a Liz Frank injury. That would be the worst possible situation. Jeff Ulbrich is really secretive with injuries. He did not give out any information on Monday. We are scheduled to talk to him again tomorrow, so hopefully we'll have more information.
Rich, really appreciate you joining us.
All right, Connor, always good to be with you. Have a great holiday season, and the best to all your many devoted watchers and listeners. We'll catch up sometime soon.
Rich, appreciate it. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you, ladies and gentlemen. ESPN's Rich Cimini coming in, joining us here today on an afternoon edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. I'm going to stay on here for a little longer, answer your final questions, comments. You want to get in on the conversation, do so by clicking the pinned comment in the chat. Let's go to our first caller of the day, our guy Johnny Boy.
Oh, what did he think Aaron meant by what he was talking about?
Did you put it in the chat?
Yeah, but I put it in the personal.
Oh,
like
sorry, man. I didn't see. I didn't see that. You know what? I'll reach out to him. I'll get his answer. Then I'll DM you.
Yeah, it's all good. But I don't know, man. The Garrett stuff. It's a crazy conversation right now that's occurring because I could see it from both sides on what's going on. And I mean, I wouldn't fault him for him, but I think what it is, to be honest with you, man, is just he's pissed off. We haven't won.
Yes.
And it's aggravating as anything as well. But wanted to get your real quick take in regards to, did you see the Pat McAfee show?
I did not watch it live, but I saw some of like the mini clips on Twitter. Not clips, but like, for example, Rich Cimini quoted it and he put it out on Twitter. So I did see some of that.
Yeah, like he pretty much essentially was saying that he knows that he needs to take a, he's to restructure his contract itself. And so does Devontae, so we could be rocking together. So I think that was kind of like eye-opening as well towards that, man. But hey, man, that's awesome you had him on, bro. That's pretty dope, man. Keep doing your thing, dude. So
I appreciate it. I just want to get your thoughts again here before we let you go. Do you want Rodgers to play quarterback next season? Do you think he is the best option? Are you for, taking a flyer on Tyrod Taylor, signing a free agent, drafting a guy, whether guy you draft starts or sits behind a Tyrod, a Rodgers, or a bridge quarterback? What are you hoping for happens at the quarterback position this offseason?
It's so tough, dude, because I'm in such a I look at the free agency class that's coming out. I don't think Sam would come over here. The McCarthy conversation is kind of like intriguing, so I would like that. But then who is your bridge quarterback, right? Yeah. So why not have it with Aaron if Devontae runs it back? I could see that. Do I think that if that occurs, we will be successful next year? No, I don't. Dude, I'm everywhere, man. It's the reasoning why, like I've been saying it a lot. Let me get to the end of the season with him and see what's going on and then kind of go from there. Because I mean, yesterday, like him trying to force feed freaking Devontae, that was not like, I didn't like that.
No.
I understand that we don't have any kind of like playoff hopes anymore and it's all gone and all that stuff like that. But when you got Garrett open up in a slant like that, and you could go ahead and make the ball, and get another first down and you don't, that's kind of like, it rubs me the wrong way.
Same here.
And a lot of the dunk, like little dink and dunk stuff that he's been doing and whatnot, but again, man, it's tough. I don't know, essentially, like I want the GM hired already, right? Because I think I would feel
you got to speak with a lot of guys though. Like they've only interviewed 3 candidates right now. Dimitroff, I think, is the clear answer. I don't think you find anyone better than him, but I think they still have to do their due diligence. I think Borgonzi in Kansas City is going to be a name to consider. Dorsey, Agnew, those guys. So I think they'll wait until they could speak with everyone once the offseason comes. But I think they have a GM in place by the beginning of February, the latest.
And that's what I mean. Like I'm like, I already want to move forward. Like, fast forward all the way to that part already of it as well to get to see then what we're going to do. Because I think then you would get a lot of these questions really answered. Like, what are they going to go ahead and do with Aaron? Is Aaron going to go ahead and just be like, I'm reworking my whole contract doing this? Devontae's doing the same thing. Then they could have a real conversation and then we'll see where we're at. I still want to go ahead and bring in another quarterback to go ahead and put him in. I mean, I've been one of the guys that's been on board with Justin Fields
Love Fields.
just to essentially make Garrett happy as well too.
Mhm.
So like it's one of those, but I don't know, man. It's again, it's tough because then I go and I fight back and be like, damn, how many games were we that we were so close and we could have won it? Again, it's just the ifs that could have
Yeah.
occurred, that could have happened, should have happened, didn't happen. You know, I don't want to lose Garrett, is what I'm trying to
No,
say at the
yeah,
end of
not
the
at all.
day. So if I had to pick between those, I would go Garrett for the future.
Yeah, I just think you mentioned Rodgers trying to force feed Devontae the ball. I completely agree with you. I went back and watched the film. There were several plays where he tried to play hero ball and get it to Devontae. One of which was the 4th and 4. I think we were at the opposing
He threw that
33-yard line.
fade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, come on. You're 4th and 3, 4th and 4. I on those short fourth downs, I did not like them on the fourth downs going with Brees Hall right up the middle. That's terrible. If you're going to do that with a running back, put Braylon Allen in. He's a power back. That's why you have him. Also, I'm still not a fan of the running play. On those 4th and 3s, 4th and 4, I love the play action bootleg where you give Rodgers the option. Although he's not mobile, we've seen him take off in the past few weeks. Take off, get those 3 yards with his feet, or you have Conklin just cutting across the field. You can hit him right on the sideline. Instead, you try to throw, like a back shoulder fade to Devontae 24 yards into the end zone when you have Garrett Wilson just right in the flat. It doesn't make sense to me. I think a lot of it, though, has to do with – I'm not here to defend Rodgers either. Let me just get that clear, Johnny. I think a lot of it has to do with – I think the scheme is one of, if not the worst in the league, especially from an offensive
100%
standpoint.
agree with you.
And Rodgers is trying to play hero ball, and instead of just going back to the simple things, I also think he's audibling way too much. He's changing the play calls, but again, the scheme's terrible. It's terrible.
And Connor, and I think that's what Garrett meant when he talked about, I took LaFleur for granted when I had him here as well, because that's one of the other things that not many people are really discussing or talking about is that comment itself. He wants to win. I mean, he plays in a premium position, which is a wide receiver. You get wide receivers are divas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want the ball in their hand
because
they know what they could do. So I can't fault him for being upset or pissed off. If anything, I applaud him for doing that because that shows some fire that he still wants to win and he still wants to play for this damn team. I would be concerned if he was just like, it is what it is. Like, I don't know if you've seen any of the Kayvon Thibodeau from the Giants, the defensive end.
Kayvon, yeah, for sure.
Right? Like his stuff,
his training camp comments are absolutely hilarious.
You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Or even during this season, the comments that he would say afterwards. And I'm like,
same with Neighbors.
Exactly.
I think you're trying to talk about both of them really. They're both two young stars. Like there are people saying now that Neighbors might be the one funding the planes to fly over MetLife. Both of these teams are a complete mess.
It's bad, man. So, but hey, man, this was awesome, dude. Keep doing your thing. Yeah, dude. I honestly think last thing I did want to say was the Aaron stuff. I think he's talking about the defense, man. Like I really think there's been I've been saying it like almost all year, even when you had Antoine on, right?
Yeah.
And I really think there's like some turmoil between the offense and the defense that's not being really talked about, man. Because for so long, the defense was the baby. It was the main one that was carrying the team itself. And it seems like it kind of almost switched around this time around. You know what I mean? And they're getting a lot of the brunt that's coming from it. And, I don't think they're used to it. And I think they're trying to, cause issues amongst each other within the locker room, man. So I don't know, man. Winning cures everything. Just win the damn game and be different, man. But I appreciate you, bro.
Appreciate you,
man.
Johnny. Great stuff. Appreciate you calling in. Find him at Jets Worldwide. They're on every Sunday. Alan, I see you backstage. I'm going to get to you in a minute. I just want to, say one thing on what Johnny said there about the defense. I think the problem overall with this team is they simply cannot play complementary football. We see weeks the defense goes out and blows the game, and then we see weeks, for example, Denver is a perfect example. The defense allows 10 points, and the offense scores 9. So this team, I think the biggest thing, what's killed the season, the defense has imploded at times, but they haven't been able to play complementary football all season. And when they have, a perfect example is the Houston game. A perfect example is the Tennessee game, the New England game. All three of those games the Jets have won. So I think the biggest thing for this team is playing complementary football. But let's go back to your calls. You want to call in, pin comment in the chat, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate all the support. Let's go to our guy Alan, who's joining us. Alan, we haven't spoken in a while. How are you doing?
Hey, Connor, first of all, appreciate the growth that you've had over the last little
I
while.
appreciate it.
Unbelievable.
Thank
God,
you.
you're better than 99% of the people out there. So I
Thank you. I
appreciate it.
really appreciate it.
Um, as you saw in the chat, I brought up JJ McCarthy.
Yep.
And I know people have been talking about maybe the Jets trading up for either Ward or Sanders. Again, I don't have any faith in either of those guys, and I truly do not want to give up any 2026 capital. So I brought up McCarthy's name, especially if they re-sign Darnold, because I had read a couple of articles, some Minnesota articles that said if that happens, you could totally see McCarthy being on the block. And one trade that a couple of trades had been talked about. One would be that the Vikings would trade their first rounder along with McCarthy for a team in the top 10. So like they're sitting currently like 28, 29. They would trade their first and McCarthy to the Jets for the 8th pick, which would make sense because I don't think the Jets are going to have a quarterback at pick 8 that they really want.
No.
And the Jets have to actually think about the future. And the second trade, which I thought was a little bit more intriguing, would be McCarthy and their first to the Jets for Sauce Gardner, which is a completely different because I'm thinking Sauce Gardner going into his 4th season had 2 exceptional years. This year has been very wishy-washy, and I truly believe that his negotiations over the next 12 to 24 months will be absolutely grueling. It will be Darrelle Revis negotiations. He's
Yes.
going to be a guy who's going to be asking for the house. He's going to be asking for 25 million plus. So I truly believe the new regime is going to come here and say to themselves, we didn't draft these guys. Let's make a mark and trade one of these guys. I truly believe one of the 2022 studs will be dealt, whether it's Wilson, whether it's Sauce, whether it's Brees. I don't think JJ really has any trade value coming off the Achilles. So I thought both those trades were interesting, and it would give the Jets an option at quarterback. Again, I love Kevin O'Connell, and I truly respect the way that he's really molded Darnold into a top 10 quarterback right now. And the idea that he picked McCarthy gives me hope that maybe he sees something that I don't. I liked McCarthy. I didn't love McCarthy. So if somehow, some way the Jets bring in a Flores who piggybacks with a McCown, it would make sense to bring in a McCarthy, just familiarity with the quarterback over the last year. That's the reason I brought it up. And one final comment on Garrett Wilson. Again, I'm in the minority here. I don't blame Garrett Wilson one bit here. If I was him, I'd want out, honestly. I wouldn't want to come back, especially if the Jets are actually thinking about bringing Aaron Rodgers back. I mean, he targeted his buddy for 13 times yesterday. If you're Garrett Wilson, I'm like, I'd like the ball. I think I'm as good as Devontae Adams. If I'm Garrett Wilson, I would want out. And I know people are like, oh, we hold his rights for 2 years. We can hold him hostage pretty much. Again, Garrett Wilson deserves to be with a winning organization. And going into his 4th season, I know he might look at himself as a top 12, top 15 receiver, but he doesn't want to lose. He's tired of losing. And if I was him, I'd demand to get traded.
Yeah, a few interesting points there, Alan. I thought they were good points as well. Regarding Sauce Gardner, it would be I agree. It would be a statement for the new regime to come in and say, I didn't draft this guy, and go in and, trade him right away. What I think eventually happens is I seriously think I think there's a chance that Garrett could potentially hold out leading into next season if we see these final 2 games and Devontae Adams is getting 11 and 13 targets per game while Garrett's getting, looked at 5 to 7 times per game. I could see a world where that happens, but what I think this was, if I'm the new regime coming in, what I would do if I were them, Garrett right now is the only one I feel completely comfortable extending. And I'd extend him to a, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle type. Devonta got 3 for 75. Jalen got 3 for 81. So something in there, 3 for 78, 3 for 80, something like that. And then, Sauce is interesting. 2-time All-Pro his first 2 years in the league. If I'm the new regime, you pick up his 5th-year option, like as you should on the 3 rookies, the 3 2022 first rounders. You can't do it on Brees. I pick up his option, and then I wait until next season because I don't feel comfortable extending Sauce right now. Like, he has to show he could bounce back after, you described it perfectly, a wishy-washy season. And then for Jermaine, you have to evaluate him after next season after coming off a gruesome injury. That's what I would do. What are your thoughts there?
I'll disagree with one thing on Garrett. I don't think Garrett would sign here for less than $30 million a year.
Wow.
I
Really?
don't think so.
Would
I
you
think
sign him 3 for 90? Would you do 3 for 90?
No, I think he's going to ask for more years, and I
Okay.
don't think. First of all, as much as that money would be life-changing money for him, I actually think he's a guy who's going to get frustrated if they go to another regime and another quarterback. I mean, I don't think he wants to play with Aaron anymore, but the
Mhm.
idea that he's going to go into a 4th season with a new quarterback, I think the money helps, but I think he wants to go to a winning organization. I think he's gonna, if he stays, I think he'll ask for 30 to 35 million a year.
Wow.
I think he'll ask for more than asking price. I think he'll look at the Amon-Ra St. Brown contract, who
Mhm.
got 4 years at 120 million. I believe he got 75 million guaranteed. I think there will be a 3 in front of that number. I do not think it will be a 2. I think he will ask for 30 plus. But again, as much as money will change his life, I think he is so frustrated about losing year after year after year. I think he would take less money to go to a winning situation. So if you trade him to LA, to the Chargers, or you trade him to Denver, or you trade him to Houston to play with his former quarterback CJ Stroud, especially after the devastating injury to Tank Dell, they need another receiver.
Yep.
That would make more sense for a guy like that. He would be in a winning situation with a quarterback that he has confidence in. Taking 4 years at $120 million with a no-name quarterback or a Tyrod Taylor, I don't think that really does anything for him. I think he's frustrated not because he hasn't gotten paid. I think he's frustrated due to the fact that the team stinks. That's the bottom line. He won in high school. He won at Ohio State. I don't think he wants to come back here and say, you know what, I'll take my money and just sit down and just relax. And hopefully in year 2 or 3 of this new regime, we win. Again, these are his prime years. He wants to get paid, and more so, he wants to win. And I don't see this team winning anytime soon with this regime and with this roster. That's the problem. Again, if you're Garrett Wilson, if I was him, I would demand a trade. I would want out. And I know I get heat for it. People say, oh, I hate the Jets and this and that. I'm thinking about the player. And if I'm the player, I don't want to play for a loser organization year after year after year. I can get paid wherever. I want to get paid and I want to win. That's the bottom line.
Now, Alan, what if he comes to the Jets and says, "I'll stay here long term," but he's asking for the Amon-Ra 4 for 120? What do you say to him then? Do you give him that, or do you say we'll trade you?
Um, no, I would take the 30. If I would give
Okay.
him the 30, I don't think he's gonna. I think he's gonna ask for more. Actually, I think he might ask for a 5th year. I think he might ask for a 5th
Wow.
year. I think he might go 5 for 160. I think that makes more sense. But again, I just think he's. You see, there's nothing worse than a young receiver who's disgruntled.
Hmm.
And if you're heading into year 4, not knowing who your quarterback is, or if they bring back Aaron next year, knowing that his buddy is on the opposite side of him, who's getting much more of the ball, why would you want to come back here? Again,
Yeah.
if I was him, I would go to my agent. And again, Garrett is a good guy in the open, but you have no idea what Garrett is behind the scenes. He might go to his agent and say, you know what? I want to save face in public, but behind the scenes, I want you to go to these guys and say, "Get me the hell out of here." And I think that's what's going on behind the scenes. I know that Rich got a lot of heat for making the comment that Garrett wants to get out of here, but I think Rich is actually thinking from experience. He understands what's going on here. He understands when a receiver is disgruntled about what's going on. So again, for the player, I would want to be gone. For the team, I'd like to bring him back, but I just don't think that's enough, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, and all of this is going to unfold. A lot to talk about, obviously, this offseason. I think they'll pick up the fifth-year option on all three of those guys. But, Alan, one more thing here before I let
Sure.
you go. Jay wants to know here about, I don't, here it is. How do you feel about Vrabel as a coach candidate? One, what are your thoughts? Obviously, head coach GM search coming up. Thomas Dimitroff, he's a name that's really appealing to me. I know you're pretty much on the Ray Agnew train. Dimitroff is where I am for GM. Where are you in this head coach GM search? Who are your, clear-cut number one candidates?
I mean, I'd love Ben Johnson. I don't think he's coming here. Vrabel's an interesting guy. I think Vrabel will have his choice for a lot of jobs, whether it's with Chicago or whether it's in Vegas to reunite with his buddy Tom Brady. Or
Mhm.
I know that people have said that Gerard Mayo is safe, but again, if I'm Robert Kraft and I can get Mike Vrabel with a young quarterback, $132 million of cap space, and a number 2 pick, that is very enticing. You never know, even the Giants, who might have the number 1 pick and their pick of quarterbacks, that might even be a more enticing job than the Jets. I'd
Hmm.
like Vrabel in a sense because I think he brings discipline to the organization. Um, I'd be worried about the offensive coordinator he would bring in. I know people have been talking about Downing. The name I keep reading that he would bring in as our new offensive coordinator would be Tommy Reese, a guy who was the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame and at Alabama. I believe he's currently right now working either I think he's working with the Browns, I believe. I'm not sure. I
Okay.
think I forgot what coach he is. That's a name I've heard. Um, Again, I wish that there was an offensive candidate that had experience. That would be at the top of my list, and I truly don't believe that John Gruden is a candidate. But again, the two guys that would make sense if you bring in an offensive guy would be a Ben Johnson and maybe a Liam Cohen. But again, Vrabel would only come here with full autonomy and a hefty paycheck,
Yep.
and he would definitely ruffle feathers. But again, I think that's what this organization needs. Are you willing to give him 6 years at $80 million? I think that's what he's going to ask for. He's going to ask for $12 to $15 million a year. He's going to ask for full autonomy. He's going to ask for personnel decisions. He's going to ask for the moon. And are the Jets willing to do that? Or is Woody Johnson and Chris Johnson willing to do that? I'm unsure if they are, but if they do, I think he brings discipline. I worry about the offensive guys he'd bring in. That's the problem.
Yeah, I looked at his offensive connections from his time in Tennessee, and even with the Browns, they're not really impressive names.
No.
If he were to come here, the OC I'd want is Tanner Engstrand, the passing game coordinator for the Lions. But again, there's a chance he might take over the Lions job, OC job, if Ben Johnson takes a head coach job
Absolutely.
elsewhere. But honestly, as much as Ben Johnson's being talked about as this big time name as a head coach candidate, I think there's a strong chance he leaves. Don't get me wrong, but the past 2 seasons he's been talked about as a head coach candidate. He's interviewed for multiple head coaching jobs, and as he released not too long ago, he has a strict guidelines of I want this, and this if I'm going to take a head coaching position. Excuse me. So who knows if any job is really too appealing to him and if he stays. But I think if the Jets, if Vrabel can come in and promote Engstrand to an OC here, I would like that. And then DC, I'm not too concerned. I'm sure he has some sort of connection, and obviously he's this defensive-minded head coach. For GM, Glenn Cook's an interesting one, the assistant GM for the Browns right now. Obviously, Vrabel's a consultant, and Catherine Reich. She's also, I think, vice president of football operations in Cleveland right now. She
Is it
interviewed for the
Catherine Hickman or Catherine Reich?
I heard I've seen
Okay.
people
I
call her
think you're right.
Catherine Hickman and Catherine
Okay.
Reich at the
Yeah,
same time, but she interviewed for the Vikings job, if I'm not
she did.
mistaken.
She did.
Yeah, not too long ago. Before I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, but their GM right now had like no football experience until he went to, I think, Princeton, and then he was just a crazy analytics business guy. Now he's one of the best GMs in all of football. So it's a crazy story, but she interviewed for that job. Cook and Reich are both from the Browns organization, so I'd expect one of those names to potentially come in as a GM if Vrabel does take the job, and also Ryan Cowden, I think there's two assistant GMs with the Giants, Brandon Brown and Cowden. It's being reported that Vrabel wants Cowden as his GM wherever he goes. So again, if you want Vrabel, you might have to sacrifice the GM position. But at the same time, Vrabel's, again, like you mentioned, going to want say in the personnel decision.
Everything.
Exactly, everything. So then you think of that, okay, so then how much of a role does the GM really play when Vrabel's essentially going to have full autonomy over the organization? So I think that's something to keep in mind there. But Alan, really appreciate the call and appreciate all the support. Have a great
Always a pleasure. Keep up the good work, okay, man?
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate the support. We'll wrap up here in a few minutes. You guys want to get in on the conversation, last chance to do so. Pin comment in the chat. Smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Again, get your final questions, comments, thoughts in. Smash the like. Subscribe. I know some of you didn't have questions for Rich, but I saw you in the chat, so I'm just going to let you know. I see you guys. Appreciate all the support. Leanie, thank you for tuning in. Let's see. Oscar, thank you so much for tuning in. We did answer your question. Hep, I asked this question at the end. I appreciate you tuning in. Jigga, appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate all your support. Let's see who else pulled up Jay's comment. Johnny called in. BC, appreciate you tuning in. So final chance. We'll wrap up here in a minute or two, but a really great show, and I appreciate support. Last chance to call in, pin comment in the chat. Last chance to get your final questions in. I've been, really trying to work, thinking about these top offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator candidates. I was talking about Engstrand with Allen. Josh McCown was brought up earlier. I see Jay mentioned McCown here. He's an interesting one. He actually interviewed for the Texans head coaching job 2 years in a row. So he's interviewed for big time jobs. He's no stranger to the New York market. And he also retired in 2020, so he's familiar with the modern day schemes. He's able to relate to the players nowadays. It would be really intriguing, I think, if the Jets were to bring McCown in. And then Joe Blameyer is his name. He's the passing game coordinator for the Chiefs. He's someone I'd be interested in. He's been with the Chiefs for a long time. Various different roles on their offensive staff. Be interesting to take a flyer on him as an offensive coordinator. I wouldn't mind that. Marcus Brady is a younger guy. He's the Chargers, passing game coordinator. I wouldn't mind him. So a lot of interesting names coming up. A lot of interesting names coming up in the head coaching cycle. Jersey Jet, appreciate it. Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Appreciate your support. I think that's going to do it for us here, just past or at the 43-minute mark here of the show. Appreciate the support. Smash the like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. I am your host, Connor Long, signing off. We will see you next time. JTS Jets, Jets, Jets.